We are starting chapter 4. Very exciting. So where are we holding? What's going on? What's going on is we started in chapter 1 with the idea of the reality of the soul. Every single one of us is a piece of God. A piece of God means innately we're worthy. I think that's almost like the crux of so much angst today. People just feel they're worthy if I get enough checks on my chart, if my nail polish and my manicure matches, if I get compliments, if I succeed, if I score. And that means I'm innately not worthy, because I'm only worthy if whatever happens to prove that today or for the next 5 minutes or for the next hour, I'm worthy. Perek Aleph, chapter 1 of Tanya, is saying we're innately worthy. We're a piece of God. Every single one of us is a piece of God. We start off worthy. You know, the famous parable, the Rebbe passed away, and his only son, who was actually a young child, said, he's the next Rebbe. He's the son of the Rebbe. And that was the custom. So he became the Rebbe, and he was literally a child. And he's acting like the Rebbe. And the Hasidim were like, I mean, they know he's officially supposed to be the Rebbe, but like he's a kid. Well, what he did was he told them a story, a very powerful story that I think has a lot of relevance for every one of us. He said, imagine, or I don't know if he said imagine, I'm saying it's my own words, obviously not his words. You know, you have a group of explorers that are working really, really, really hard to scale this very, very, very high mountain. And they're working and they're climbing and they prepared for months and, you know, And they finally get to the top. Wow, what an accomplishment. Who has scaled such a peak? And they look around and they see a young kid running on the top of the mountain. And they say to him, how did you get here? And he said, me? I was born here. In other words, what he's saying is, you're looking at me and I'm a child, but guess what? I was born on the top of the mountain. I think chapter 1 of Tanya is telling all of us, and especially, of course, being in the 7th generation, the generation of the Rebbe, the generation of Mashiach, we're born on the top of the mountain. So we innately are worthy because each one of us is a piece of God. That's the starting point of Tanya. Chapter 2 was saying, well, let's explore. What does this mean we're a piece of God? Well, we have a godly soul. Well, what's a godly soul? So chapter 2, in general, gave an overview on what is a godly soul. What is the power of a godly soul? What does this mean? The definition of a godly soul, as we begin in chapter 2 of Tanya, you are a piece of God. What does that mean? That was chapter 2. Chapter 3, which we just concluded, is the idea of the powers of the soul, which is called technically the bechinos, the 3 intellectual and 7 emotional, that together is the inner workings of the soul. And we spent a long time explaining those 10 powers. And now chapter 4 and continuing, chapter 5 are about the garments of the soul. Now, garments in Hasidic thought is a very fluid term. There are many terms in Hasidic thought that are very fluid. What I mean by fluid is that depending on the context, it could mean different things. Like it's a term we like, and it has a lot of uses. And depending on the context, in this situation, it means this. And in this situation, it means this. So classical Tanya, generally speaking, when we use the term garment, what we mean is how the soul expresses itself. Why does the soul express itself? Well, like everything else in this world, the soul has what she wants. What the soul wants is God, which means all I want is God, because I, my core, and you, your core, and every Jew, their core is a godly soul. We all have appendages like an animal soul. We all have the challenge like an evil inclination. We all have a body, how the soul manifests itself. But in essence, the definition of every Jew is a piece of God, a godly soul. And the godly soul has one universal desire, meaning every godly soul has the same desire, to connect, to fuse, to be one with God, which is very important to understand, because that means all I in my core want is God. So how do I get God? Well, that's sort of a question, a philosophical problem, because God is infinite and me, I'm finite. And how can infinite and finite be one? Well, they can't. No, we can be one, because God created the way for infinite him and finite me to fuse. And that way is Torah mitzvahs. Studying of Torah and fulfilling of the commandments enables the fusion of God and me and my soul. And that's all my soul wants. Why am I emphasizing that point? Because this is the key to understanding how my soul is expressed through her garments. All my soul wants is God. The only way to connect to God is through Torah and mitzvahs. So the only time my soul is expressed is if I'm studying Torah, living Torah, thinking Torah, feeling Torah, which is manifest in the commandments, which is manifest in living a life for God, the expression in Hebrew being lishem shamayim, for the sake of God. If it's not Torah, if it's not the commandments, if it's not for the sake of God, it's not my godly soul. Which makes something that's sort of complex actually very simplified. How do I know if this is a God space or not? Very simply. Is this Torah? Is this mitzvahs? Is this for the sake of God? If it's not, my godly soul is like, I'm checked out. I got nothing to do here. Because the only thing the godly soul wants is God. And the only way to connect to God is how he says. And the only way he says is the roads of Torah and mitzvahs and connection to God through l'shem shamayim, which would mean doing something seemingly mundane, but for the sake of God. So it elevates it from mundane to godly. Why am I emphasizing that point? Because there's a lot of spirituality in the world. There's a lot of people in the world striving to have a spiritual connection. And there's lots of things that are pseudo-spiritual, meaning they feel, is this God or not? Very simple. Torah, mitzvahs, for the sake of God. L'shem shamayim. It's not Torah. It's not a commandment. It's not for the sake of heaven, but it feels very spiritual. Wonderful. It's got nothing to do with anything. Meaning, like, of course, the obvious example, people that, go to India and spend however many years with a vow of silence and they manage to levitate themselves or they're living in a cave, whatever. Could feel very spiritual, but that's got nothing to do with anything. Spiritual is not synonymous with God. It could be synonymous with God, or it could not. So how do I know if it's God or it feels spiritual? Torah, commandments, sake of heaven. Those are the only options. That's the only frame of reference that my godly soul will express itself. If my godly soul is connecting to God through Torah, commandments, or for the sake of heaven, she's going to come through her garments, the way the soul is expressing herself. Expressing herself where? On me or in the world. What are the garments of the soul? There are three garments. The human being, my thoughts, my speech, my actions. Only options for the soul. And only means of expression, Torah, mitzvahs, or something's for the sake of heaven. So that's the foundation of chapter 4. And it's a very, very powerful foundation because even though it might sound like everything I said was so obvious and simple, and what's the question? But in real life, things are not so obvious, simple, or non-questionable. Meaning things could be murky. Things could be like, is this my godly soul or not? Is this a connection to God or a pseudo-false experience? This is a test. Torah, mitzvah, for the sake of heaven. No. It's not a God experience. Yes, any one of the three? It could be. It could be your soul connecting to God. Any thoughts, any questions on any of this?
Go up to the mountains and meditate, and all that. So there is this Rabbi Finger who went to the mountains and for 6 months he didn't speak. They have this meditation where they don't talk. Then one day it was he was standing in front of the creek and all of a sudden his parasha from the Torah came to him and he started saying the whole parasha by heart. And from there, he decided to start looking into Yiddishkeit. He became such an amazing rabbi, Baal Tshuva, brings so many people and he tells his story, So yeah, there is a lot of spiritualities out there, but ours is the real one, is the only one.
Right, because it's not spirituality, it's God. That was the point I was trying to make. Thank you for the story. because sort of expresses this point. Spirituality, there can be many spiritualities, but the soul's not looking for a spiritual experience. The soul's spiritual. It doesn't need a spiritual experience. The soul's looking for God. So spirituality, the soul doesn't need that. What my soul craves is God. It's like the famous words of Yeshaya, the prophet, Isaiah. Whoa, all who are thirsty, go drink water. And we're like, for that, I need a prophet? You're thirsty, go drink water. What would I think? But water symbolizes Torah. You're thirsty for God. There's lots of seeming isms, spirituality, roads, but there's only one way to quench that thirst. You're thirsty, you want God, go to Torah. Because only through Torah do you quench your soul's thirst for God. You can have many spiritual experiences, but to quench the thirst for God, for that, you need Torah. All right, so let's start looking inside chapter 4. So chapter 4, Perek Daled. Okay, we're starting off, page Ches, chapter 4. The Oid, and additionally, because beyond what we've been saying about the aspects of the soul, the 10 powers, the 3 intellectual, the 7 emotional that we delved in at length in chapter 3, every godly soul has 3 garments. Shemachshava, Dibur, or Maisa, Shel Taryag Mitzvahs HaTorah, which are the thought, the speech, and the action of the 613 commandments of the Torah. So the Rebbe is saying here, your soul needs to connect to God. And the only way, as we're saying, is through thought or feeling of Torah and her commandments, a speech, words of Torah or her commandments, an action of Torah or her commandments. Otherwise, no point of expression. Now, this number 613 is very, very, very precise, as is everything by God. There's nothing random there. So what's the precision of 613? We each possess a godly soul that has 613 powers. Parallel to that, we have an animal soul that has 613 powers. Parallel to that, we have a body that subdivides into 613 parts. And parallel to that, we have 613 biblical commandments. Parts of soul, parts of animal soul, parts of body, commandments. Why? Because it's all precise. Every part of my soul has a commandment that vitalizes that godly part, that refines that parallel animal part, and that heals and sustains that body part. It's interesting. It says in the Talmud, if you don't feel well, study Torah. You're like, what? It says you have a headache. If your head hurts, study Torah. If your stomach hurts, study Torah. If your leg hurts, study Torah. If you study Torah. And you're like, well, I don't know, studying Torah can make me feel better. If I had a headache and I start studying, I'll have a bigger headache. What the Talmud's really meaning is every part of your body is healed through a specific part of Torah. Problem is, we don't know which part. But if I got the part right, every part of my body, every part of my animal soul, every part of my godly soul is all connected to the specific commandment, to that specific energy of Torah. And when I'm doing that commandment, when I'm grabbing that Torah energy without knowing, it's infusing my godly soul, refining that parallel part of my animal soul, and vitalizing that part of my body. So literally, the more we immerse ourselves in Torah, the healthier we are on soul, on animal soul, and on body. And that's why very often you see, like, for example, in the letters of the Rebbe, when people write of various ailments, and the Rebbe says various spiritual things to do, and you're kind of like, what does that have to do with that? Well, because the Rebbe knows that that has to do with that commandment, and that body part, and that animal soul part, and that godly soul part are all precisely aligned. And again, we don't know. But maybe sometimes when we're searching and sincere, God allows us to grope in the right direction and to find those parts of Torah most needed for my soul's health, my animal soul's refinement, and for my body's alignment. And that's why everything is precisely 613. So, continuing, now that we've established that we have these 613 commandments, which are the garments of the soul, because as we said, the soul will only be expressed if she's connecting to God. Otherwise, so to speak, it's pointless. And these are the ways. That when a person, an Adam is a term for the highest level man. So in our highest space, when we fulfill the action of the action commandments, and when in our speech, we're involved, we're oisig. Oisig means like an esek, a business. It's interesting. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayat, said that we see the term oisig, like we have the term oisig b'Torah, and we would translate it as busy with Torah, but that's like sort of a strange term. Oisig, esek means a business. So why are we using that term? And the Rebbe Yatz explains, because that's how God wants us to look at Torah and the commandments, like a business. Meaning, if you're a businessman, as the Rebbe Yatz explains, I'm not a business person, but I'm taking what the Rebbe Yatz says as truth. If you're a business person, you are proactively doing everything you can to make your business succeed, which means you don't say, well, I've got great wares, and if someone comes knocking on my door, I'll be very happy to show them to him. That's not what you do. You get a store on a public place, you put up a sign, you advertise, you promote, you talk, people come in, you grab them, you convince them, you speak of the value of your wares. You're proactively promoting your product and making the sale, whatever the sale is. That's a business, meaning you're not passive. You're making it happen. The Rebbe Rayat says that we use the term oisek, again, which the root word is esek, a business. We're oisek in Torah mitzvahs because it's got to be our business. It can't be like, I've been religious my whole life. I've at least been religious for the last 40 years or 30 years or 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. So, yeah, I do kosher. I live in Chicago. I can go to Jules or Mariana's or Sarah Tech. No, a businessman is not relaxed. A businessman is pushing to make it happen. If you're successful, you're pushing to make it happen. And God is using this term oisek because he wants us to be pushing in our Judaism to make it happen. Now, it's very interesting, the Hashgacha Pratis, that I'm saying this is because this week is a Torah portion of Achar Mos Kedoshim. And in the talk of Kedoshim of this week, the Rebbe actually develops this concept and specifically connects it to Avas Yisrael. And the Rebbe says, now the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, he's talking about Torah mitzvahs because we do use this term Isaac for Torah mitzvahs. But the Rebbe says, especially Avas Yisrael, loving another Jew, is our esek. It's our business. It's our passion. Of course, in the talks of the early years, the Rebbe was educating our generation that we have to be proactively making it happen to help another Jew, spiritually, to help another Jew physically, through physical to spiritual, or just physical, or just spiritual. In any way, it should be our business. It should be something we're doing proactively, not passively. And the Alter Rebbe is using this term right here. If we could hear the words I said, ubediber hu oisek b'feirush kol tareg mitzvot hilchosehem. With the speech, the person is oisek. It's his esek. It's his business. We're proactively utilizing our speech to talk about God's commandments. It's not passive. It's exciting. It's proactive. I'm making it happen. And the more I get the preciousness and value, the more I make it happen. Meaning, as I was saying a few minutes ago, why are we doing Torah mitzvahs? For one reason, for one overarching reason, if I'm looking at chapter 4 of Tanya, because my soul wants God. If I didn't realize that, I could have a lot of other answers. And I could have challenged you, and I'm sure you could give me many answers to why do I do Torah mitzvahs? Well, I mean, this is the best way to live. True. This is the healthiest way to live. True. This garners much reward. True. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying, and that's all true. The best way to live is Torah mitzvahs. The best way to eat for a Jew is kosher. The best way for a Jew to dress is modest. The best way for our psyche is to take 25 hours off every week and detox. All of that's true. 100% true. Bring down blessings, 100% true. This brings down the blessings. Brings redemption, 100% true. This brings redemption. All those things are very, very, very true. But the core desire of my soul is God. We said that's why the soul is being dressed in her garments, because she wants God. When I look at it that way, I understand that why am I doing the commandments? Because I want God. Very core understanding that's pivotal in Tanya and will play out in many chapters. If I'm not focused on God, different commandments have different value. Different commandments have different weight. Something more significant, something bigger, something smaller. Some things I want to focus on, some things I don't relate to. But if I want God, none of that's relevant. Every commandment, a vehicle to God. And the same thing with Torah. If I'm thinking, well, Torah is the most brilliant, fascinating body of knowledge, that's true, it is. Torah elucidates. It does. Torah teaches me how to live, how to behave, how to interpersonally, how to do the commandments. All of that's true. But if I want God, none of that is very relevant. What's relevant is Torah is connecting me to God. And from that perspective, every aspect of Torah has the same core. This is a way to connect to God. And when I think of it that way, my Torah and mitzvahs, study of Torah and keeping the commandments, is very exciting. Why is it exciting? Because I'm connecting to God. Because here I am human, here I am finite, here I am small. I might not think very highly of myself because, as we said, we need chapter 1 to heal us of how we look at ourselves. And a lot of us are not healed yet. And yet the Creator and his infinity and me become one through Torah mitzvahs. So that's exciting. That's powerful. That's significant. That's precious. And if I get that, it's a very exciting and joyous service. If I miss that point, the preciousness of the connection, the infinite value of the connection, then sometimes it's a burden. Sometimes I'm stressed. Sometimes I don't have the energy, right? None of these things are familiar to anyone, I'm sure, but sometimes. But if I get to the core, I'm connecting to God. I'm a human being. I'm small. I'm limited. But God and I are one. Every mitzvah and every study of Torah is exciting, is precious, is infinite in its value, and creates a lot of joy. So when we're looking here at this idea, as the Rebbe is saying, that when you're taking your garments and with your action, you're investing yourself in the action of the commandments. With your speech, your oisek, it's your business, the explanation of all of the 613 commandments and their laws. Uba machshava, and with your thought, you're grasping everything possible for you to grasp in the orchard of Torah. Orchard meaning all the levels of Torah. In Hebrew word pardes is really an acronym, Pshat, Remez, Drush, Soid, for the 4 foundational levels of explaining Torah. So at this point, something very exciting is going on. Hare Klolus Haryag Ivrei Nafsha. The comprehensive 613 limbs of his soul. Remember, as we said, 613 powers of soul, 613 parts of the animal soul, 613 parts of the body, 613 commandments. So in totality, the 613 limbs of your soul, miluvashim b'taryag mitzvos haTorah. They're engarbed in the commandments, which means they're engarbed in God's will and wisdom. What my soul wants, her desire, is happening as I invest my thought, my feelings, my speech, my action in God's will and wisdom, in his Torah and in the commandments. And if I get that core, it's an exciting process. It's a dramatic process. Something's really happening. It's not like, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to say my chitas. Oh yeah, I'm cooking one more well. After cooking for 8 days straight, I'm making Shabbos. It's like, no, I'm connected to God. And that's powerful. And that's exciting. And that gives joy. And your soul feels that joy. The Rebbe says that every human being wants happiness, overarching desire, all mankind, happiness. We could say, well, we'd also like, some money or this or that. True. But once our basic needs are met, that doesn't feed us that much. What feeds us, what every human wants, the Rebbe says, is happiness. And the Rebbe says, happiness in its core is really, the Rebbe uses a Hebrew term, of course, this is in Hebrew, menuchas hanefesh. Menuchas hanefesh means being centered at your core, deep inside your inner space. And the Rebbe says, for a Jew, that menuchas hanefesh, that inner calm, which is the core of the happiness, is achieved by Torah and her commandments. So we all want happiness when we're really in our space, when we're really within where we should be, when we're living at our core, calm, tranquil, where I'm supposed to be, I have that happiness. And for a Jew, living at my core, having that calm, that inner certainty comes only, exclusively through Torah and her commandments, which is really an amazing thing because we're so lucky. Because what percentage of the world can achieve this inner peace, which the Rebbe says is the key to happiness that all mankind is seeking? How many people have that key? And I imagine everyone in this class does. So when the soul is achieving what she wants, we're talking about the soul and all she wants is God. And you can be like, all right, that's what my soul wants. What about me? No, you are your soul. I mean, I know in theory I'm my soul, but I don't really feel that. So what about me? So when the soul achieves what she wants, when the soul gets God, we achieve what we want. Because we're living a life of menuchas hanefesh, of being in our space completely, which is a life of the real definition of happiness. Anyone has any thoughts on that, on seeing the connection inside between serving God and inner peace and happiness? Has anyone experienced that?
So last week on Monday, I was, there was so much coming at me, And so as we were getting to around 8 p.m., I looked at my phone and I saw that there is the Dvar Malchut shiur at Bet Mashiach. So immediately I told my husband, I need something. I need it. So I went on, and I tell you what, the calm, and I just could breathe again. I just put everything aside, and I was really, really able to connect, to that shiur, and it was really amazing. So yeah, it's amazing what happened when you turn to Hashem.
So you were a basket case, and you stopped everything and said, okay, I'm completely stressed, completely basket case. So I'm just going to put everything on pause and learn. And then you did, and then you felt calm.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful that you had the wisdom to do that.
Well, the text jumped at me that there is a shiur in Dvar Malchut at 8. I said, 5 to 8, I'm going to go join this. I really need it. And it did affect me. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Anyone else has seen it? You could say no. You could say you've tried and it hasn't worked. I'm open to that also. Or you could share if you've seen this. Yeah. Anyone else?
So saying Tehillim, especially on Shabbos, really does that for me.
It calms you, it
And
centers you.
yeah,
I find
and
also when I'm like, and I'm just like, I gotta say
well,
Tehillim. I'm
and
just,
and during
to me, saying
during
Tehillim is
during
dumping it all on God. I'm just saying Tehillim, give it over to Him.
yeah, it's very different than davening,
You know, it's
but
so
they're both.
interesting to say that. I remember so clearly in high school, girls that like would daven, you know, there's a certain amount of time for davening. And they would like finish davening very fast, like obviously, and then they would say Tehillim very seriously. And I remember really thinking that, like, wow, okay, their souls relate to Tehillim. They're not interested in davening, but they like to say Tehillim. And you can say, well, you're talking to God in davening, you're talking to God in Tehillim. Like, what's the difference? But it's a different energy. It really is. And I feel also what you're saying. A lot of times I think I'm very influenced by the Hayom Yom, where the Tzemach Tzedek says that if we only knew the power of Psalms, of Tehillim, in ascending on high and drawing down for us kindness and compassion, if we only knew, we'd just be saying Tehillim, Psalms all day long. And I think, yeah, when I'm sometimes in this space, I'm just like, God, I'm just going to say those Psalms. And I'm so calm because I'm giving it all over to you. And I know you're pouring down the kindness and compassion to deal with a situation that I can't really handle. I definitely relate. Anyone else? Anyone else has some areas in their life where they really see this, that Torah Mitzvos gives them that inner core space of calmness, of centeredness, of joy. So I got a hand raised and I got a text at the same time.
Well, I can jump in and just say, like, as a Balas Tshuva, I think that it's a reality. Like, you had a life before, a life after. So you see the difference. And what was really beautiful to me is one of my children said to me, like, how much they gained from us choosing it. Like, it's a whole different level of awareness of how this brings calm in your life. This brings beauty. This is like something that centers you, and they feel such a gain they had as us up there being their parents. So I think that it's just something that in who whatever, I don't know if I'm clear, but
You are. And I think that's fascinating. You know why? Because I find many, like girls, like I'm saying, going back to high school, and girls would say to me like the opposite. My parents, they're so inspired because they chose this. They're so idealistic because they chose this. They're so religious because they chose this. But we were born into it. We didn't choose it. So we have a very different relationship. So I think
right.
it's
So
really
she was able
beautiful.
to see
Yeah.
that and be able to value that we have that.
Right. Which is a credit to how you raised your child.
Well, I think it's also as children get older, they're not teenagers anymore, so they have the wisdom to look back and see what they've the value of it. Maybe as a teenager they don't see it as clearly, but as you can, I think whatever.
True, 100%. A teenager could not value, and definitely I've had people as they grow up after high school come back and like, oh, now. So I think what you're saying is very true. That maybe teenagers are looking at their parents and like, well, you made this choice, but I just was born into it. And then as you get older, you look back and you like appreciate your parents' choice. That's really beautiful. That's really very, very validating, not just to your choice. I mean, you made the choice, but that you somehow gave this over to the next generation, that they appreciate your choice, that they see the value in their choice as well, because they didn't choose. They were born into it, but they still can appreciate your choice, which means you really convey to them what life was like without and what life is like with. That's really precious. I hope we should all have that blessing, that all of our children appreciate the choices we made and see the value in it. So what Chava wrote was feeling that centeredness, that inner space, being in your space, which is joy, is the miracles, the rays of Mashiach. When we see Mashiach unfolding, when we see the miracles happening in our world today and everything going on in the world, my gosh, you're not aware. I've got loads of videos on it, loads of classes. When we look at the destruction of evil and God's enormous protection of the Jewish people, when we see those miracles unfolding, we can really feel one with God and so joyous in who we are. Malki, your hand was raised.
Yes. So actually, I was gonna touch on something from a headset. I actually would say I feel the same way when it comes to my own journey and all that. That I definitely feel like there's a very strong connection and love and praise for God just within my own journey, and thinking about it, just like, I don't know, just all this gratitude that comes up within it of just thanking God for this entire journey. And, you know, it's a choice that I've chosen also, like as someone from was saying, that I've chosen this life because this is what I deeply was searching. Like my soul is thirsting for this. Like if I was to think about, could I have gone this direction without it? To be honest, I wouldn't take anything back. Like this is the life that I've chosen. It's just, there's this, as also like that, passing that on to the next generation. It's like, as I've thought about more recently, it's like, I don't know, so how do I say it? Like, it's just like almost like an inner, like, wow, like thinking about like in the next how many 20 years, 10 years, 15, 30, 40 years, it's like, wow, I'm can't believe it. Like this is, it's like, yeah, as it's, I know and recognize it's been a journey. And honestly, thinking about it, I wouldn't take anything back. Like I would do it over again tomorrow if I could, you know.
That's so beautiful. And it's really, every soul is different. So it's interesting how Sarah said Tehillim and Chava said the miracles unfolding of redemption, and Rachel saying Torah. And I relate to it all because I feel it with the Tehillim, and I feel it with the miracles, and I feel it with Torah. I see it in all. And I think every soul just has her points where it's just so strong that I'm in my space, I'm connecting to God. And therefore, there's that inner peace. And therefore, there's that joy. Some of us have a quieter joy. Some of us have a more exuberant joy. Some of us have a more intense joy. But it's such a joy when you're in your space. And for a Jew, in our space means when we're with God. And I could say for myself, I think what opened up my soul to feeling this, and therefore to feeling it in Torah and in Tehillim, and is studying Hasidus and really studying Tanya. I really remember when I started studying Tanya, feeling like my soul waking up, my soul getting oxygenated, my soul being alive and powerful, my soul being joyous. And I hope for all of us, there's that experience as we study Hasidus. And of course, in this class, as we're studying Tanya, really giving our soul a voice, really allowing our soul's voice to be heard by who? To be heard by us. That we feel the joy of our soul, the joy in connecting to God, which is, as Rachel said, in studying, and as Sarah said in the Tehillim, as Chava said, in seeing the hand of God in our world. We hear our soul's voice, and it's joyous, it's energized, it's excited, and we're blessed because we know and we can do it. And as Firma said, we could pass it on. She was talking about passing it on to the next generation. Malki echoed that hope of passing it on to the next generation and connecting it to the talk I brought in of the Rebbe with Avas Yisrael, loving every Jew. It's not just passing it on to our own children. It's passing it on to any Jew we can in the world. And of course, in a sense, to every human being in the world. You want happiness. You want to feel in your space, calm. You're where you're supposed to be, doing what you're in this world for. There's a road, there's a path, and it's called God. And as we walk his road, as he commanded, we're all feeling it. And it's the best feeling in the world. So we're going to stop at this point. And what we're going to discuss next week is specifically how our minds connect to God through Torah and how our emotions connect to God through the commandments. That will be